a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Amazing Arizonans with Mike Broomhead.
Back again with Amazing Arizonans, and this is a story I've been wanting to tell for a long time. Major General Kerry Muehlenbeck from the National Guard. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You bet. I've been looking forward to it.
Getting to know you a little bit, it always is at a function, so you're always busy. But I wanted to talk more about your career, because everybody that I know that knows you personally has nothing but great things to say and great respect for you and your career. So I want to get into that part of it, but I want to talk about you personally. How did you go from being in the Midwest to a career in the military, and when did you know that's where you wanted to be in the military?
So I think, at least for me, developing through life, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up was more a process of elimination than it was picking a particular thing. And so I think when you're young, you don't have a lot of experience in what you want to do. So you have to try everything to figure out what you don't like and like. And that's exactly how I ended up joining the military. Went to college, went to law school immediately after college. So not a lot of work experience. After law school, you do a couple internships your second year and your first year, and then you have to figure out what you want to be. Do you want to go work in corporate law, public service? And there was something, all my friends were busy joining the firms. They had an exciting life there, and that just wasn't striking a chord for me. So I remember, I think it was third year, there was this ratty poster in the basement of Indiana University School of Law. And I remember it said something about join the Air Force, become a JAG. And I thought, well, what's a JAG? I mean, they hadn't had the TV show yet.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, and you didn't have the internet to look things up.
Few Good Men wasn't out yet.
No, I don't think it was. And you didn't have the internet, so you couldn't Google it.
Right.
So I remember doing some research in the career counseling, and I thought, well, you mean I get to join, become part of a team, I get to do all kinds of law. I thought that's a great opportunity for me to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. So that was really how I launched into joining the military. Didn't have a history of military service in my family. I think odds and ends, we had some service, but not a strong legacy where my forefathers had been in the colonial militia or anything like that. So
what was it that made you love it so much that you stayed?
So that's a good point. I think we do a good job at getting people in, but the retention and making them stay or getting them to stay is crucial for us on the Guard side. And I think for me what it was is when I was younger and then in high school and in college, I was always involved in athletics or team sports. And when I went to law school, somehow there wasn't that team sport environment. That was back when they were throwing books out of the library window, so you couldn't get your assignment done. So the idea of becoming part of something bigger than myself was the appealing part. So I got to be part of a team, so to speak, a smaller team, at least in the JAG Corps, another team, the Air Force, the Armed Forces, and then really you're kind of Team USA. I mean, and it makes it so your existence isn't so unilateral or monolithic.
What was your sport? What sports did you play? Did you play at the collegiate level?
I did. I was involved in the two sports for me in high school. Well, in high school, you do everything, I think. The big ones for me were fast pitch and tennis. I had a tennis opportunity, a scholarship in Michigan. Tennis wasn't for me. So I went to Northwestern. I had a partial scholarship to the University of Michigan that I didn't execute. But I went to Northwestern, good academic school, and then I thought, well, shoot, I'm going to just try to walk on the team and see if I'm good enough. And I showed up in PT clothes, and they thought, oh, thank God you didn't come in blue jeans. And so I ended up trying out for the team and making it. So I played 4 years Division I at Northwestern, was a second baseman, shortstop, so middle infielder, and then played extensively throughout the summer, which is where you get more competitive, I think, at least back then. The Midwest was limited by seasons, so you could only play at certain times of the year, but obviously out in California, that's where the big competition was. They had nicer weather so they could play year-round. So, and then carried that, was lucky, missed out a little bit on law school. I didn't have any years of eligibility left, but then moving into the Air Force, I got to play ball for the Air Force too.
So were you on? Was it an intramural thing in the Air Force, or did you play for the national team? I mean, what was?
Yes, it was the Armed Forces women's softball team, and then the Air Forces women's softball team. So you played in the All Armed Forces tournament. The Army played the Air, the Navy, and the Marines. The winner then got crowned the champion, and at the end they would pick an Armed Forces team. So they would pick the all-stars from the different teams, and then the Armed Forces team would compete at the national level.
How'd you do in those competitions?
So the Air Force, I have to say, we always lost to the Army.
Really?
Yes. They grew them bigger and stronger than we did. So, but we stole more bases, if that counts.
And my brother was a superstar athlete in high school. Then he played college football and baseball, and he has 2 daughters and a son. And I loved watching my nieces and my nephew. My nephew's still in high school, and I still love that team aspect, and I love the competition. I coached forever. I wanted to be a college coach. I just love that team aspect.
What sport?
Football.
Really?
Now, my nephew plays basketball.
Yeah.
Which he does not get from me. I'm 5'8" with a 3-inch vertical. I'm not playing basketball. But I love the game of football. And my brother was a superstar in football and baseball. My nieces both were really good soccer and basketball players.
And I think you take something in athletics or with team sports or with competition. I think you still get to compete, but you get to compete in a collaborative form. So the team wins and the team loses, but you learn how to win, you learn how to lose, and at the risk of marking people winners and losers or succeed, success or failure, I think it's important that you learn at that level what it's like to lose. It turns you into a better winner.
I've always said, and I'm sure I heard this from someone else, but I take credit for it.
As you should.
Sports teach you to win with grace and lose with dignity.
Yes.
And when you're in high school sports, I remember a story of my brother when he was a sophomore in high school. They lost a game against a district rival to go on into the playoffs. And this was a team that went on to win the state championship. This was a legendary football program, and they returned a punt with 14 seconds left in the game to beat us. And there was not a dry eye on that field. The next year we went to them and we beat them 40-6. And it was that full year of what was a devastating loss to a high school kid and high school coaches.
Sure.
Turned into such a motivating moment that it made them so much better for the rest of their time. And I think it made them better human beings in the long run.
I agree. And I think you get skills in athletics that you may not learn behind a keyboard or in a video game in terms of communication, camaraderie. I think it's those soft skills that will take you further, I think, than whatever your technical skills may be.
And when you work with a group of people, let's be honest, when you're in a locker room, not everybody gets along all the time.
They don't have to.
It's like a family.
You're right.
But when there's a common goal, when you walk out of the locker room and onto the field, everybody understands that the mission is bigger than the individual. And when you learn those skills, you're a better employee. You are going to work in places where you've got to work with other people.
Can we hire you to be a recruiter for the Guard?
I would listen. It's funny because let me tell you a story about my other brother. We're talking about you.
No, please.
I want you to hear this. My brother Tom. I lost a brother in Iraq. So Tom was the quarterback of the high school football team. He was 2 years younger than me, and was just the consummate team. Everything you would say. Yeah. I mean, he really was that guy. So he graduated in 1987, joined the military pretty soon after that, and was killed in 2003 on Memorial Day in 2003. I met 2 of the men he served with at his funeral, and they took us outside and they said, "We want to tell you the whole story." And they told us the whole story of what happened. And I remember them saying he returned fire, he protected us, and he always looked out for us. And so we carried that with us. 5 years later, I got a phone call here in Phoenix from a guy in my hometown in Florida that said, "I was a freshman in high school when Tom was a senior." That was 1987. Yeah. And he said, everybody picked on the freshman. He said, but Tom always looked out for us. And I thought, wow, 1987, 18-year-old kid, he always looked out for us. Grown man on a battlefield in 2003. The character he learned and he built as a young man was how people remembered him on a battlefield. So I think that there is such a correlation between that in sports and what kind of a human being you're going to be. The character you show in athletics is the character you're going to show in life.
I think so. And I think, there are debates on when we develop our ethical systems, but I believe, and most will say, that your systems are firmly in place probably by the time you're in kindergarten or first grade. So some of those lessons that you learn on the playground carry you forward. And I'm a big fan of, I don't know if you know Robert Fulghum, All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. So classic book. I often recommend that when all my peers are recommending the military doctrine and the strategy books. But I think this one, it's a small primer. He's done a couple other editions, but I think it tells you that you learn how to negotiate, you learn how to compete, to collaborate. You develop your social skills at that point. How am I going to negotiate to get in the front of the line for the swings? How am I going to handle rejection when you beat me in chicken fights on the monkey bars?
Yeah.
And so I think I don't know if it's called playground wisdom, but he makes this great analogy about what you learn kind of in the sandbox or on the hill in the playground.
But I also think that what team sports can do for you is refine some of the bad habits, because if you're being coached by good people, and I would say people that you are in command of, maybe in the military as well, if they are forced to interact on a team where they have to be less selfish and less self-centered, it can break some of those bad habits if it's done by the right people.
Sure. And you can't, the team is clear. One person doesn't make a team. So you stay in your lane, but then I suppose you help others improve in their lanes as well.
When you mentioned being a part of a team for a long time, where you went into the military and you were a part of a team, when was it for you that you realized you were comfortable in being asked to be the team leader, to be the team captain? I mean, you oversee the entire Arizona National Guard. That's not a job. They don't just give that job to anyone.
Oh, they do. No, they don't. So I think for me, it was a non-traditional path to the position that I am. I think I am, I don't know what you would call me. I'm more of an unlikely leader. I didn't come up as a flight commander, squadron commander, group commander, wing commander on the air side. And on the military, they have their benchmarks that they have to go through in terms of platoon or battalion or brigade. That wasn't me. I came in as an attorney. And so I was, complete support staff, supporting the wing commanders and supporting the other commanders. And I think it was just a journey of trying to do, not all the jobs were the best. Contract law, not my favorite, right? Environmental law, not my favorite. But I think if you go in and I tried to do the best that I could in that given moment, even if I didn't like it, because that then sets you up for the next best moment. And so for me, it was engaging with commanders. It was doing the things that nobody else raised their hand to do. It was getting outside the legal office, engaging on other now intramural teams where you meet other commanders and you develop relationships outside the office, where here they think, well, hey, if I can talk to her on the ball field, maybe I can talk to her in the legal office, or I can come to her and ask for assistance. So I think for me, it was just, how do I continue to interact and make it okay for people to come and talk to me? Whether it was a commander come and talk to a lawyer, a legal assistance clients asking for help. I think that's how it started. But really being in charge, I think it started in the National Guard when I was put in a deputy staff judge advocate position. That was pseudo leadership. Then I made it to the SJA role, which was the senior attorney for the wing. I had done some national level course directing and was moving that way. I had my niche areas where I'd get called for advice, but it was really General McGuire, who was my predecessor, who, when he got appointed, said, okay, Muehlenbeck, I'm going to tap you on the shoulder. You're the next one up. You're going to go in and do the Joint Task Force Command. I said, sir, I don't know if that's a good idea. I said, nobody knows my command style. I said, they've only seen me as a lawyer. You're going to upset a lot of people. The apple cart's going to turn. And he said, yeah, okay.
But there is a difference between someone saying you're a great lawyer
and
someone believing you're a great leader.
Yes, and I don't know that I would say I was a great lawyer. I guess the word's out yet on whether I'll be a great leader. But I think the transition and the skills that you have to be a success, again, they go back to the relationships that you build, the way you communicate, and how you treat people. Governor Ducey interviewed me for this position. I had retired. I had served my time. I tapped out as a 1-star, and I went back to my normal 9-to-5 job, which was I was a department chair over at Mesa Community College. And I had 2 years there going back, just being a normal citizen. And that's when McGuire said, hey, can you do me a favor? He gave me a call and said, why don't you go interview? I need you to interview for the next tag position. I thought, okay. He is a wonderful man. He was a phenomenal mentor to me. And I thought, I owe him this. I owe him a good interview. There's no way in hell they're going to pick me, right? I didn't think that was within the realm of possible. So I went in and I tried to engage in the interview much like I engage in every setting, which was, I didn't feel like it was an interview. I felt like it was a conversation. Mm-hmm. And Governor Ducey said, well, what's the thing that makes you most successful? And I said, well, sir, if you picked me because of what I know and my smarts, that's probably the wrong pick for you. I said, frankly, it was never what I knew that got me to where I was. It was the relationships that I built and the way I was able to leverage everybody else's knowledge as a whole. That sounds actually self-serving.
It is.
But it's a way to, I can't be the expert in everything, and I'm not. But I think if you surround yourself by quality people, they will follow you, but sometimes you have to follow their advice and trust them.
But in observing, in being at the MC at functions and being around you, I would have said that about you, and we don't know each other that well. So I think you exude that. I think you do make people feel like they're an important part of the team and that their input is necessary. I think that is a leadership quality that most people can't learn that. You have to realize some people get into a position of leadership. I'm sure you've worked for leaders that it's my way or the highway, and I know everything, and you're going to do it my way, and that's the way it's going to be.
True, but the reality is I'm not. We have the Air Force and the Army in our National Guard here in Arizona. I am not a pilot, and that's what the Air Force does. I was not a maintainer. I was not a pilot. When you look at the Army, that's the big infantry, right? That's the big, career field. That wasn't me. So to go in as an attorney, they know I'm an attorney. I can't deny it. They can look at the badge on my chest and say, oh, it's not wings, right? But I think all you can do is play to your wheelhouse. So I think I'm a pretty good advocate. I think I'm good at making decisions. I'm not good at being a pilot, and I'm not good at being an infantryman, but I can leverage those experts to make good decisions. So for me, I've never, I can't, I know less than what I know, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Every day I find out how little I know, but every day I look for a helper, and all of a sudden there they are. And then I soak up their knowledge. Sometimes I forget it, but I'll ask them again the next day. So I think you can't be ashamed to want to learn and to admit that you don't know something.
But there are a lot of people that assume leadership means you have to at least give the impression that you know everything.
Yeah.
There are people like that.
Yeah, but yes, I do.
So I want to talk about a little bit of a serious topic. We had a conversation about your soldiers that were wounded in that drone strike.
Tower 22 in Jordan, yes.
What was it like for you realizing that part of your job was going to be sending people into combat?
So I had not done a deployment ceremony before I was the adjutant general. I'd been to them, but I'd never had to stand up and face them and send them off. And that was a humbling moment for me because I didn't feel like I was qualified to do that. So all I could do was say, we're sending you into harm's way. We've got you, and we've got your family. And so you need to do what you do and focus on mission, but we'll always be here. And I think that's what I tried to convey to them. To follow that up, though, I have tried ever since I've been appointed, all of our service members that have been deployed, I've tried to get out, predominantly on the Army side, because those have been our big deployments, and see each of the units that have been on their deployment. And we've made it so far. We've made it to every one of the deployments that we've had. So it's, we've got 800 deployed now. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't go shake 800 hands, but gradually you get to see targeted units, whether it's in Jordan or Kuwait or wherever they're deployed across the Middle East or in other countries. So I think just the reach back, the idea that I can't do your job, but we're thinking about you and I'm here to support you, and how do we make it better?
I was at when I called it a welcome home ceremony, but when people were returning home and they were at the end, they acknowledged people that had been on their first deployment, second deployment. And I remember sitting there and looking into the faces and not disrespectfully, but thinking, these are kids. These are very young people. And some of them being recognized for their third and fourth deployment. The amount of one of the things I love about the Guard in Arizona, I would imagine nationally, but I only know the Arizona Guard, is that truly citizen soldiers, that these are people that live a normal life and they get uprooted from their families and they go and they complete missions around the world and then they return to that same life and they don't ask to be recognized. They don't ask to be treated special. And I just think there's something about that is under recognized by the population as a whole.
And maybe the under recognition falls back on me because it's under education, that I haven't gone out enough to educate people on what the Guard is. Sometimes I feel like we hide in plain sight. And I have to tell you, I did 4 years active duty, then I jumped to the Guard. And when I moved to the Guard, as I was getting ready to separate from active duty, the staff judge advocate at the wing here in Phoenix called me and said, "Hey, Kerry, are you interested in joining the Guard?" And my words to her were, "What's that?" So even I didn't know, and I had spent 4 years on active duty. And I think the idea is that most people want to live in a community, they want to work in that community, and they want to serve in that community. And they recognize that in the Guard, you can do all that. Yes, you may be deployed to another location for a year, but you eventually return back. And it's the classic militiaman from the 1600s where they're out in the field plowing one day, they drop the plow, they run back behind the front door, grab the musket and go fight. Mm-hmm. Then they come back, drop the musket and pick up the plow. And I think the plow is just a metaphor now to whatever career fields they enjoy on the civilian side. But we have, I am surrounded by rocket scientists, by engineers, by other attorneys. You've got HVAC technicians that are doing one thing. So if they deploy and now the cooling and heating system breaks, now all of a sudden the kid that's supposed to be doing maintenance on a helicopter, you pull him in and he can fix the HVAC. So it's really this multi-capable soldier and multi-capable airman I think, gives the Guard the depth.
One of my true people that I admire the most, he retired as a lieutenant colonel, Tim Woods. And Tim and I have gotten to be close friends over the years. And he, of all things, he was my insurance guy in addition to being in the Guard. And his father, a retired general.
Yes.
And he would talk about his service. And it was some of the proudest moments that he talked about was serving the Guard and his deployments and how he'd served his community. And that's where I learned a lot about the Guard was from him. And then to be able to go and watch his final flight and to be down there at Papago and watch him fly in and see the hundreds of people that turned out to kind of congratulate him on his retirement was kind of an eye-opening thing for me, that what an impact one soldier had on so many people. It just was remarkable to me.
Well, and I think, your drill status guardsmen are fortunate because you are surrounded by different friends or a different support network. You've got your family, you've got your Guard family, you've got your work family, you've got whatever hobbies you may have on the outside family. And so it's nice to see this patchwork of individuals that will come out for these ceremonies. It all walks of life.
Where were you when you got the call that your soldiers were involved in that drone strike and that some of your soldiers were injured? Where were you and what was your reaction?
So it was in the late evening hours. What was it, the end of January? It was 28th, 29th. We were in Kazakhstan. So we had come back from an event. We were there to do an exchange as part of our state partnership program, and we were driving back, and General Hokanson called. I had received a text message probably 30 minutes before that from our land component commander. So, in those instances, you're trying to get information, but you're trying to let the folks on the ground handle what's on the ground, and you trust that we have trained them well, and we had. It was clear that we had. And so you walk a fine line between harping on them for information and not harping enough to let them go and figure out what's going on. I think the hard part for them is this was a this was a surprise attack by any measure.
Sure.
And it was a successful attack by a second measure, if you measure it in terms of killed in action or casualties. But then I think after the attack, then it's, okay, what's next? So I can take care of folks and we can triage, but are we going to get hit again? What do we need to do to shore up the defenses so that we're not a target a second time? And the uncertainty of all of that, I think, confounds a response. So not that when you enter combat, you don't expect, or a combat area or a tense geographic location, but I don't think there had been attacks there. And so when we had prepared them to go, they were doing more personal security details, not really in a combat mission. So I don't think they had put that into the spectrum of what could happen. Now it's right on the forefront. So that deployment has changed a little for them.
It's interesting, the people that I've talked to, and I've never been in combat, but the people that I've talked to that have been come back with a new respect for training, because the training seems mundane and redundant many times, but when it kicks in those moments, the ability for them to rely on it and realize that reliance is what helped them and saved them in many cases, makes them now rely on the training a little bit more and understand why it's done so often.
Well said. You're right. Which, again, if you go back to sports, why do they make you field 100 ground balls in practice? This is boring. I don't want to do this, right? It's the same thing.
I saw a great video the other day, and it was of, I can't remember which of the teams in the Final Four, but the caption on the picture said, "Every kid hates doing these drills." And it was just ball drills. And there's a Final Four team practicing the fundamentals that every kid hates doing and is bored with, but here they were at the most elite level in college basketball, still doing the very basics in the drills.
Well, and I think there was a quote of mine, and I'm going to get it wrong, but he's was it Chuck Noll? Was he the Steelers coach?
Yeah.
So he had a quote about what it takes to be champions, and it went something like, champions don't do anything extraordinary. They just do the ordinary extraordinarily, if that makes sense, which really is, it goes to your point.
Yeah, there's a great video going around right now of the Steelers coach, Mike Tomlin, and he is saying to a group of, I don't know who he's talking to, but a group of people, he said, it's not what you're capable of, it's what you're willing to do. And I thought, man, coaches have got some kind of wisdom. Every once in a while, they say things that stick with you forever, and those are a couple of the examples.
Yeah, good.
So are you still a big sports fan?
I still follow different sports, yes. It's seasonal for me. Yeah, I got frustrated with the NFL for a while, so I turned them off. But I've been quite pleased the last few years, diehard Detroit Lions fan. So it was nice.
Oh, you got great reason to be a fan
right
now.
I have to tell you, that was the one thing my dad and I used to do on Sundays in Michigan when it's snowy and cold out. 12:15 the NFL Today would come on. 1:15 was kickoff, and that was back in the Billy Sims days.
Yeah.
So I follow the Lions all the time. I like the March Madness only because I really like the collegiate sports. It's fun to see them, and that's one of those where David and Goliath.
Yeah.
In any given day, any team can win. It doesn't really. It's not based always on the best team, but it's about the teams that will play together at that moment.
Well, so you've got a number 11 team right now in the Final Four.
Yes, you do.
In NC State. It's pretty cool. Julia, my producer, who is in the room here, Julia is a Cronkite graduate in sports journalism. So get this, the poor kid. She wants to be in sports journalism, and she's stuck with me in the news business.
That's okay.
But
you're talking sports. That counts for something, doesn't it?
We do.
Julie?
And so what's great is to have somebody that I can rely on that can get me the information I might not have. Because I love college football, but I don't know a lot about college basketball. But I watch the tournament religiously. Sure,
and I like competition, so it doesn't matter if whether I've played it or not. I just got a text before we came in here. My nephew is playing in a national tournament in hockey in Michigan, so they won the first game, which was a good thing. But I know nothing about hockey. I go to these games and I yell crazy basketball or baseball euphemisms about referees and umpires. And
Yeah.
my sister said, "Carrie, you gotta stop."
Well, no, you
so,
don't.
right,
That's
right.
the best part of it.
Yeah.
I went to New York to watch my nephew play high school basketball.
Yeah.
He was playing some. I thought it was a tournament, but they called them. I'm trying to remember what they called the games, but they were playing just some games against schools in New York, and it wasn't a tournament. But I went and watched. I still love high school.
Sure.
Sports.
Sure.
I love it. Just watching. I think it's the love of the game. I like the NFL too. I like to see the most elite athletes play, but there's something about the people that just play because they love it. It's an amazing thing to watch.
It is. I agree. So I do. I still like the sports. Still fun for me.
So I was told to ask you about 70s rock and roll music.
70s rock and roll. So I grew up in the 70s, but I don't know that I had an affinity for 70s music until it was past the 70s and it was over. But
Like what? Let me give me an example.
So I've always got the 70s on. So you pick it. Normally I play this game where I can name most of the 70s songs just by hearing them.
Okay.
But if you take me into the 80s or the 90s or now, forget it. And my XO is in the room also, and she always has to find the right music channels. And then we play this Name That Tune, and she hates it. So
I do the same thing.
Okay.
But I do it more with older country music.
I'm
See, anything
stuck
outside.
on country. It was all the 70s rock. So
Yeah.
you name the Steelers Wheel.
Yeah.
Some of the old ones, the BTO and the Guess Who. And
BTO had a great album.
Yeah.
Not Fragile.
Yeah.
I love that album when I was a kid, and we laughed. Julie's
Yeah,
over
see?
there laughing at me
Yeah.
because they'll play music.
Yeah.
And Ed runs the board sometimes for us, and when they play music, they know that I can't help myself. I spend the next 3 minutes talking about the album and the song.
Right.
But if you play something post 1995, no, I have a true story. I was listening to somebody played a bite of somebody being very critical of President Trump, and it was a woman that was speaking, and I said, "Who is this?" And they said, "It's Cardi B."
Oh.
And I said,
Who's that?
"Is she famous?"
Oh.
I had no idea who that was.
No, but if you hang around nieces and nephews who are like 12 and 10, you'll know. Yeah.
No, even that I don't.
Really?
It's in one ear and out the other.
I hear it.
I'm caught in that window where I know a lot about
what you know. You know what you know. Yep,
right.
that's it. So the 70s. Don't ask me the 80s music.
And you can always tell when I make a reference because, we have the control room glass, and I'll make a reference that I realize is dated because Julia will look at me with the obvious look on her face like she has no idea who or what I was just talking about.
But it's a good reinforcer that we're turning into our parents because my parents used to do that. And I did it, this was about 5-10 years ago. I had a student in class that came up with some excuse about why she couldn't turn in her homework. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, that sounds like the B-side of a 45.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, and you could see this deer in the headlights. I said, you have no idea what I'm saying. I said, is there anybody else in class? And then one other young lady raised her hand and said, I think my dad has those.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Right.
That's the worst when they tell you, you're the same age as my dad.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
I'm older than their dads.
All right, so you'll appreciate this when I tell you my answer, but nobody else understood it. But what was your first concert?
My first concert that I actually paid to go to?
Yeah, that you went to. When I say to you, what was your first concert? What was your first concert?
Oh, you're gonna laugh. Hall & Oates.
I love Hall & Oates.
I didn't pay to that one.
Okay.
I got in, and then the other one was, was it Simple Minds, Alive and Kicking?
All right, yeah.
That was popular.
That was 80s.
That was the 80s, yeah.
My first concert was Blue Oyster Cult and Foghat.
Oh, jeez. I won't ask when you're born.
I was 12. I was born in 1967.
Okay, that's when I was born.
Okay.
When?
June.
All right, I'm older than you.
Okay.
April.
All right.
Yeah.
So you have a birthday coming up or
I do, coming up.
Okay.
In about 21 days.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when we look at that era, I think growing up, there was a romance to my childhood. I think all of us do. We played music today on the air, and I said to them, their music, I can remember exactly where I was. It takes me to a specific place.
Yes.
And they played a song today by Def Leppard, and I said, let me tell you what this song reminds me of. This was our plan in high school. we would come home from high school parties on the weekends. Now, I didn't drink. I was always a designated driver, and my friends didn't really drink either, but we were in high school.
Is he serious? He didn't drink?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay, just checking.
Notice I said didn't, and I didn't say
Right.
don't.
Past tense.
Okay.
Yep.
But
He's matured since
yes,
then,
of
right?
course. So my plan was, this was safety, is I would drive my buddy's car. We'd drive home. We'd blast Def Leppard on the stereo and put the windows down so we didn't fall asleep on the way home at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's what Def Leppard reminds me of.
Perfect.
Right. What a great plan.
So in some of mine, really, I got a lot of my rock and roll or the taste for some of the old bands. I had an uncle who was a child of the, he was of age in the 70s. He was the hippie. He had the bell-bottom jeans and the tie-dye.
My cousin was that for me.
Yes. Yeah. And he was, he had everything. And I remember he introduced my mom to this short singer who had a name that you wouldn't believe was his real name, Neil Diamond. So back in the 70s.
I love Neil Diamond.
I absolutely adore him.
My mother played The Chair all the time.
The Chair?
The song.
I Am
The
I
Chair.
Said.
I Am I Said.
Yes.
But wasn't the album called The Chair?
It could have been. I didn't have albums back then. I just listened to the 8 tracks from my uncle. So, yeah.
And the album closed funny in the back with the string in the back.
Yes. Yeah.
So my mother raised me on weird music, because when I say weird, was an eclectic taste.
Sure.
She would clean the house on the weekend, and it would be Hotel California.
Okay, the Eagles.
Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Yes.
Captain and Tennille.
Yes.
And Neil Diamond.
What about Cat Stevens?
No, I mean, we were fans, but she didn't have...
Bread? No bread?
Oh, of course. But my mom, those were my mom's go-to.
Dave Mason?
She would stack them. No.
Yep.
Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was my youth.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember, I still can remember the words to Muskrat Love
from
the Captain and Tennille. I know it's embarrassing, but I still can. But those, if you think about that, I think every one of our generations has that connection to the music of their youth. Don't you think?
I do. Or sometimes or smells.
Yes.
Or food sometimes will take you back.
Yeah.
Yes.
But for me, the music takes me to places, and we'll joke about it on the air because it reminds me of specific things.
Yes.
And that connection to the people that I was so close with.
And I'm a little disappointed that we don't have tangible music anymore. There was something about touching the album or even
the album covers.
Yes. And now even with CDs, I have this monster stash of CDs, and they just sit in boxes, and I don't know what to do with them. But the artwork is still there, even on a much smaller level.
But there was nothing like records.
No.
The records were amazing.
And then
So let me ask you, since you're from Michigan,
please.
There's 2 names and there's probably a lot more that I should
Nugent
mention.
And
but
Kid Rock.
No.
Oh, okay.
Ted Nugent's one of them.
Yes.
Bob Seger.
Bob Seger, my sister and I just hit his concert, about 4 years ago. Yes, he's amazing. If you've never seen him in concert, he's amazing. We saw him when we were kids.
He's one of those people that has so many hits.
Yes, you'll know everyone.
When he starts another song, you can't believe you forgot about that song.
But I can't remember if we saw him right after COVID or if it was before, but he got up there. He was in his 70s. And here you got this guy. He looks the same. His beard and his hair is gray. And he told the stories about all the songs. He was wonderful. And he's just a guy in a pair of jeans and a black Adidas T-shirt that just likes making music.
Years ago, I saw Michael McDonald in concert. And not with the Doobie Brothers, solo, but that voice and those songs. It's one of those people, and I could sit here and talk to you about music all day long.
All right.
But it's one of those times where I think the nostalgia of the music is the best part of the journey of it.
It is.
And with Ted Nugent, I got to know Ted a little bit.
Really?
And he's hilarious.
I bet.
And my friends, my career in radio was not legitimized to any of my friends in Florida because they just think I'm a redneck kid from the Everglades. And here I am doing this stuff until they saw me on Ted Nugent's hunting show.
And then you had status.
Yes,
all
and
right.
it was. I
Street
saw you
cred
on Ted,
for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was another one, the highest grossing act of the 1970s.
Yep.
And Julia has no idea who he is.
Really? What, Wango Tango and
Cat Scratch Fever?
No? Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, see,
That's
so again...
right. Jen's over there. She knows one of them. So
yeah. But for us, that was watching those records come out. I remember the very first record I ever bought with my own money. It was in the early 80s, and it was an album by Styx called Pieces of Eight.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember blasting that in my bedroom and just thinking, this is the coolest ever.
And you didn't get to see them. I remember as a kid, I used to like Gladys Knight and the Pips, and they were coming on the Johnny Carson show.
Yeah.
And it was past my bedtime. So I said, Mom, can you wake me up at 11:30? Because back in the Midwest, he came on 11:30. Sure, I'll wake you up. I'll wake you up. So that was the chance to actually see what they look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's, we get caught in this, and a joke with people about Columbia House, where you bought
14 or what was it, 13 for a penny?
For a penny, and then you were on the hook to buy records for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But it was a time where that stuff connected everybody.
It did.
Everybody had, I saw out at Talking Stick, they have a concert series in the summers out at the pool, so it's outside. And I saw Foreigner. What an amazing, they sound great. I saw, who else did I see out there? A couple of, ZZ Top.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
You know?
Well, but I think our whole discussion, I know we went down this rabbit hole with music, but I think what it does is if you talk to people long enough, it will reinforce that you have something in common with them. And so I get a little frustrated when I hear about all the division that, we're divided based on race or religion or ethnicity or gender or sex. And I think it's easy to point out differences. But if I just sit, I've talked to you for how long now?
Yeah.
And I have more in common with you now that I've talked to you than I have that is different than the fact that you're a male and I'm a female. That's, look at all the things we've just found in common.
And when you're in a position of leadership, trying to build a team, a lot of times finding that common ground is the first step in that unifying what you have to have in teamwork. Yes, and
it's difficult sometimes when I am in my 50s and I'm talking to somebody that is 18 or 21. But what I found, one of my go-tos now is if I've got a group, I ask them what they're watching on Netflix. So what series should I be watching on Netflix or Amazon Prime or HBO? And usually we have something in common. Either I like it and I tease them that it was really good, or I don't like it and I tease them because it was really bad.
Yeah.
So that's been my go-to lately.
See, I'm too much of I'm a documentary person, so I spend a lot of time I'm sure it's boring in your world.
I don't want to. Sometimes I don't want to think. I just want to be entertained. Sometimes.
So, like what? Give me an example.
So, what did I'm watching. I like the period pieces. So, I was a big fan of Downton Abbey. I'm getting
over there
thumbs down. Do you like Downton? Okay. So, The Gilded Age is on right now. It's on HBO. Watch that. Loved all the Ted Lasso seasons.
So far, I'm batting zero.
You're batting zero?
I've not seen one episode of any of what you just said.
Really?
None of them. Here's what I do. I put on the things I've seen before that I know I like. So I've watched the old NYPD Blue series about 6 or 7 times. I've seen The Godfather about 50 times. I put on stuff that I know that I like.
Blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't watch those. Maybe The Godfather. The whole thing with the horse, though, kind of creeped me out. So,
really?
Horse's head,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
How do you measure success for yourself? You obviously, you are someone that doesn't, you're very humble, which I'm so pleased to learn more about you, because you're certainly not bragging about your accomplishments, but what is that?
They're not that exciting. Trust me.
But no, for you, there's got to be a level of success that you feel, okay, I'm very proud of this, or this is, if I achieve this, I'm successful. What is that for you?
Well, I don't know that you ever get there. Hopefully I don't have to measure my life at 56 right now. Hopefully I can.
Right.
I measure it in the 80s, and so I look back, and I think for right now, and I think similar to the position I had when I returned to my position at Mesa Community College, is as an educator, I think you measure success by your students. So as a leader in the National Guard, I think, for me, my success is measured by what the people in formation are doing. And I feel like I don't do much, Mike. I sign my name. I make decisions. It's the power of the pen. That's my weapon of choice. It's a big signature feast throughout the week. But I think when you see what the airmen and the soldiers are doing, so we had soldiers that competed in it was an innovation contest at the National Guard Bureau, and then they, the Army, sometimes they dig their feet in. And no, man, we don't want to do that. That's not a good use of time. And if I just say, please, then they do it, and I'll be darned, they end up winning the whole competition. So was it anything I did? No, not at all. I didn't come up with the the data and the graphics and the presentation to the 4-star. I didn't do any of that. I didn't even go to it. They did it. All I had to do was say, don't you want to try this?
Yeah.
Like, get outside your comfort zone. So I think for me, just to see how we can make the National Guard successful as a whole. And I think where I've fallen down is not getting more people to know about the Guard. I got to do a better job of telling the story.
Well, speaking of that,
yes.
you and signing pieces of paper and
yes.
your people, one of your people that is I've been in contact with to set this up is also setting up for me to talk with a National Guard recruiter on the show.
Great.
So we can promote the Guard and recruiting goals and the advantages of joining the Guard. Because I, like you, I would love to be a part of getting the word out about the Guard, what they do, and why it's such a great thing to be a part of.
And I hope when the recruiter comes on, they talk about more things than just this is what the Guard can do for you. So I've struggled with how I communicate this message, what I'm about to say to you when I go to these retention events. And so you have this Guard Your Future where you take folks that are getting ready to separate on the Army side and they have to make a decision. Do I stay or do I leave? And I try to let them know that it's okay to leave, that they should consider their service and how it makes them feel, that they need to find a passion, because if the Guard isn't it, and if serving your country isn't it, that's okay. Nobody is going to be disappointed in them. I think at our core, we just want people to find what their calling is and to go do that. So if your calling is to be a bass guitar in a 70s rock band, then go do that. I want you to be the best at that, because that makes you better, which will make everybody else better around you. But if it's not the Guard, then it's okay. But it's, the Guard asks a lot of people. The military asks a lot. Time and time again, I think the Guard's the easy button. And frankly, we've done it to ourselves because we say yes and we show up and we were always ready and always there. And so what I've told them is, you better feel it on the inside. You got to feel it in the pit of your stomach.
But do you tell them your story? Did you ever imagine that when you saw that poster about being a JAG, that you would end up being a general that oversaw the entire Arizona Guard?
Not ever. And in fact, not until Governor Ducey called me did I even think it was, and I don't even think my mom still believes it. He called me on the phone and he was very, so I've had interviews where I've received the position and not received the position, so you kind of know when you're not going to get it. Mm-hmm. And Governor Ducey said, well, Kerry, we had a lot of qualified candidates and there were so many good people, and the Guard's going to be great no matter who I pick, and I just can't tell you, there were so many and the choice was so difficult. And I thought, okay, great, I didn't get it, I can go back to teaching, and I'll be darned. He said, so that's why I want you to be the next adjutant general. And I thought, okay, that's not where I thought this was going. Yes, sir. Thank you. And can you show up tomorrow at 8? Yes, sir. Right. So it was one of those where I would have been disappointed had I not been picked, but I think there would have been a sense of relief also in not being picked, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And then I called my mother. I said, well, Mom, Governor Ducey just picked your kid as the next tag. She says, oh boy. Right. And so I think it's one of those, well, I guess it's going to happen. And I spent a lot of time explaining to her why I didn't think this was a good idea. I'm not a pilot. I'm not the infantryman. I haven't had all the command at all the levels. And she says, well, so it's going to be difficult for you, isn't it? I said, I think it is. And she goes, okay, well, public service isn't supposed to be convenient.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
You do talk a lot about and acknowledge the things that you're not, that are usually important to this job. Mm-hmm. But I think people see what you are that's important to this job. Do you recognize the things that you are that are important to the job?
I have tried to make the job not about me, and I think that's important. I think as a leader, I have one job. That is to make everybody else wildly successful. And if I can just blend in and not take the attention away from all the good work, that's what I'm trying to do. I try to do that. I think I've been successful so far.
Do you think about what's next?
I know what's next.
What's next?
So I will return back to the community college. That's my full-time job. I've been there at Mesa since the early 2000s. So I will eventually have to go back there. They're holding my position, so I'm on military leave to do this, and then I will return to the college.
If you weren't doing those things, what did you always want to do? What did you always wanted to be when you grew up?
So in ninth grade, when I went to high school, there was a do you remember junior achievement?
Of course. I mean, I was never a part of it.
So I
remember.
I was, but then I had to pick.
I was part of junior underachievement.
Oh no! So my mom said, "Well, try something different. You do all this sports and playing, and try something different." And so, when this came up, I was like, "That's what I'm going to be." I wanted to be a DJ. So back in the 70s, I wanted to spin music and talk and introduce all the music. And I knew the trivia about the artists. And so I got in there. I was going to do junior achievement. It was WSAM, AM, was it 1400, I think, in Saginaw. And so I showed up for the first day at the radio station, and there was no DJ booth. I didn't get to wear the headphones. I didn't get a microphone, nothing. They brought us in and said, okay, you're going to go sell advertisements for the radio station. Oh. So we had to go to businesses and, Don Brady Drugs, will you buy a 30-second spot on WSAM? I didn't get to introduce it, nothing. So finally I said, I'm not doing it anymore. And they said, well, why? I said, because I didn't get to speak on the air. Well, will you come next week and we'll let you speak? I said, okay, great. Now I'm going to get to spin my own music. And I showed up the next week and they said, here, read the news. Right. Here's a paragraph of the news.
Pretty glamorous business, isn't it?
So well, it would have been to spin the music, but I suppose you don't know what's behind the scenes or what makes a radio station run. But that's what I wanted to do. And so I think even moving forward with I had so many CDs, it's not funny. And even in when I had cassettes, when I would go to parties, I was not the designated driver, but I was the DJ at the party. So I always had some song for some party.
I was a DJ in high school.
But I don't know how to spin and blend and all that.
I did a little bit of that.
Yeah,
but I was a DJ
I don't have
in high
those
school.
skills. Yeah.
In the heyday.
And did you get paid?
Yeah. Yeah, I had
to pay junior achievement.
I was a party DJ. I had a buddy that still to this day, wow. He's a little older than us, and he actually retired as a school teacher. But his entire career, his entire adult life, he owned a DJ service. Yeah. And so I was, as a 17-year-old kid, DJing parties and dances, which was great that when you're 18, 19 years old, you're DJing the high school dances was not a bad gig for me.
See, and I just wanted to have my own booth where I could play whatever I wanted, whether it was rock or country or not rock or R&B or something. So
yeah, and I got to do that when I was younger, and then I'd never imagined I would do this, and it's a fun gig.
And I think a lot of the times what takes us to where we are is really about all our failures, right? And I said this when I retired the first time. We celebrate our successes, but honestly, if I wouldn't have failed, if the doors wouldn't have closed, I would have never had to open the other one, which then got me here. And I don't know if we embrace failure enough. It doesn't feel good to fail.
No.
Frankly, that was the reason I had to retire in the first place. As a one-star, you time out after so many years. So I was applying for a two-star position as a JAG. I wanted to go back to the JAG Corps and apply there. And I thought, well, I've been fairly competitive in my JAG career. I don't think there were anything negative against me, and it just wasn't my time. So they picked somebody else, and when you don't get the position, you think, well, okay, I guess that's it. There was nowhere else for me to go, so I retired. So it was, and that's not bad. Retiring as a one-star wasn't bad, but that was a fail. That was a failure. But I have to tell you, had I taken that position, I don't think I would have been competitive for the adjutant general position. So, there are hands at work in the universe, invisible hands that I think I don't fully recognize how they will come to benefit or to help us in the future. Isn't there a song by Garth Brooks about unanswered prayers or something? Yeah.
The fact that you don't know that is upsetting to me.
I did know it. I had it.
You weren't sure.
Well, I'm trying to be correct here.
You weren't a country fan, so.
No, I did know Friends in Low Places. I did know that one. That was back in the 90s. Okay. Yeah.
Yep, that's fair enough. Okay. Merle Haggard, familiar?
No. I know who he is. I know the names. I don't know the music. I just never... We teased my dad about country when we were kids. He really liked country, and he played like the Oak Ridge Boys and... Yeah,
see, that wasn't my...
And Boots Randolph. He would play yakety sax when he would pick my sister up from school. It was mortifying, but he enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like the old school stuff. I don't want to go down
That's okay.
Again.
No more music. Stop talking about music.
And the reason why I asked about that, what's next, because I was just curious, because you don't seem like I think type A people, it doesn't ever seem like, well, someday I'm just going to do nothing. You know what I mean?
I don't know that I'll do nothing. I'll find something. I don't know what it'll be. I'll find something. I think, with teaching, it doesn't take a big toll on you physically. I think you can teach well into your 60s, I hope. But I enjoy doing that. I think that was a passion of mine. That was an early calling for me in college. And so,
I was funny. I remember, I've told this story on the air many times. I was such a horrible high school student. And the dean of students, his name is Bill Geddes, and we're still friends. I thought Mr. Geddes hated my guts. And we were terrified of Mr. Geddes, terrified of him. And he's actually the person that asked me to leave high school in 1984. He said, at the time, you could do it. And he said, high school's not for everyone. And maybe you ought to think about joining the military.
Well, and that's what I say to students at the community college.
But there's a difference. I was a junior in high school.
But kudos to him who had the courage to be honest with you, not in an unkind way.
No, he remembered. I saw him years later. A few years later, my brother was still a senior in high school, so a couple of years later at a football game, and he remembered me. He remembered my mother. He remembered, how are you doing? He knew I was an electrician, apprentice electrician. Right. How's the new job? And to this day, he's one of my biggest promoters. Whenever I'm doing something with the national TV or radio, he'll post on Facebook about it. And nice. So there's a guy that had been in education for decades and still remembered individuals, and everybody remembered him. Yeah. And I would imagine that's got to be something for you, too, that when students come back.
It's great when they come back. Or they send me an email that says, I had one young lady, and I will remember, I can't remember her first name. Her last name was Ridge. And because she was Tom Ridge, remember the first secretary? Yeah. It was his niece.
Okay.
Darn. And she was smart, but she didn't apply herself, and she knew it. And so I think I gave her a B. It was the only B she ever got, and she was not happy. But about 10 years later, she sent me an email. She said, you know what? You taught me something. I got my own Wonder Woman cup, and I went to get a PhD at Northwestern University, your alma mater, because I thought, okay, this is, if Kerry can do that, then I will too. So
that's awesome.
She was, darn if I can't remember her first name. No, it is. When they come back, I think it means you had an effect. And I don't think right now you have whose lives you affect, but I think you walk into every engagement knowing that I don't know what path everybody is walking at that particular time. And so I have to be careful with my words. And if there is a reaction to my words, it's not personal. It may just be about what they're going through at that time. So I try not to take many things personally. If I'm honest and forthright, that will serve me well.
I appreciate the time.
It's
I know
been
you're
great.
A very busy person, and to do this
not as busy as you. I don't think your schedule is smoked compared to mine.
Well, I stay busy, but I'm not doing much that's important.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
But thank you for doing this.
Bet.
I
Thanks,
think
Mike.
I wanted people to get to know you. The role you play is such an important one. And I think to have the people understand more about the people that are leading the National Guard and the Air Guard here in Arizona, but also you're such an interesting person. I appreciate you being so candid.
You bet. I'll take interesting. That's one of the nicest compliments I've had.
You are fascinating. Mm-hmm. And if we ever get caught, if we're ever in an event together again, I'm staying away from music because I will draw your attention.
That's fine.
The entire time just talking about music.
Well, we'll have to find a place where we can be teammates on music trivia. Then we'll see.
That would be fun.
Okay.
That's a challenge I would take up.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Mike.
All right. General Muehlenbeck here again. This is why we do these stories, and I hope you enjoyed it.